And as a superintendent, what I expect a board member should be doing, and what the literature kind of bears out as some of the real key items, is be prepared to participate responsibly. Now, be familiar with the facts. Now, it's not your responsibility to go out and find the facts. The information should be provided to you. And that's the role of the superintendent, is to make sure that you're getting all of the information that you're needing. I know that Andrew can recall back when they were going through the budget cuts just before I got here. And there were some decisions made at a board meeting that were very drastic. And at the next board meeting, they had more information and they reversed those. And there was a lot of feeling of embarrassment about it. Well, it wasn't anything to be embarrassed about. It was a matter that they didn't have all of the information that was necessary at the time they made the decisions. And so that's how you're able to participate responsibly. You get the information that's necessary. I can remember telling my wife when I came home from one of the board meetings that I was watching before I took over. And I said, there's a reason why they're doing things the way they are right now. And I don't know what that all is, but I know that if they're doing the same thing next year, it's my fault. So that's something that, and I do take that very seriously also to make sure that you do get. You should know what the superintendent does. Have kind of a general understanding of their day-to-day responsibilities. And then let the superintendent handle those responsibilities, that day-to-day function. Observe the no surprise rules that I talked about earlier. Don't surprise the superintendent or your fellow board members in public. Call with questions prior to the meeting. Then share pertinent information. If you're hearing things in the community, call me up and let me know. Don't wait until the board meeting to surprise me with it, or whomever your superintendent is later on. Don't wait until then to tell them. When you're hearing things, call up and ask about it. And I frequently get calls from board members asking, this is what I'm hearing. What was that? Sometimes I might have heard about it. Sometimes I haven't. And so then I can find out, and then I can get back to you with a response on it. So, but the first time to hear something, either as a board member or as a superintendent, shouldn't be in the middle of a board meeting. So you just can't deal with it well at that time. You can't research it. You can't look into it. So show courage when making hard decisions. You're not going to make everybody happy all the time. Sometimes it may seem like you're not going to make anybody happy.
This year, that's it. With a 6-member board, not every constituency is going to have an individual representative. So you're going to represent a variety of constituents who have differing ideas. When you go through things like budget issues, every budget issue has supporters. We don't have anything, if we have to go through, for example, and make program reductions and budget cuts, we don't have any programs that are terrible programs to have, that are stupid ideas. If it wasn't any good, we'd have gotten rid of it a long time ago. And so everything's got its supporters.
And so we need to be able to represent those. We need to be able to discuss those, and we still need to be able to act. And then think upward and outward rather than inward and downward. Don't focus on management issues, but rather focus on what the school could do, what the district could do to make the community better. How can the district better serve the society that we've got? Be visionary, and it can be a daunting task to be visionary. But that's the key to board governance. So those are the expectations kind of school board members. Now, the expectations for your superintendent should treat all board members equally. All board members should get the same information and be afforded the respect their position deserves. If Joe makes an inquiry for a bunch of information, we'll get him that information. But we'll let the whole board know what that information was. Now, it's not going to be just Joe's to know about. It's going to be, this was what the request was, and here's the information. And if it was in interest to Joe, it very likely is of importance and interest to others. So, if you're requesting information, just know that when we get that and we do put it out, we'll share it with everyone because everyone should be able to get that. The superintendent should keep the board informed by providing thorough and timely information. Again, we talk about the board not surprising the superintendent. It's just as important that the superintendent not surprise the board by not giving them all the information necessary. And so you need to have as much information as possible to make good, solid decisions and to be sure that you have all of the necessary information. The superintendent should provide the board with a recommendation, even if it's unpopular, on every issue. So as we go through issues, you'll quite frequently see right in the information what the recommendation is from the administration. Now, we have to take a stand. We have to say, this is what we're recommending that the course of action be on this. And that's what you should expect from the administration, from the superintendent, is for them to put that forward. It's important, I believe, that your superintendent be able to remain some type of a sense of humor and a little bit of calm, even in stressful events. The climate for decision-making should be a calm climate. You don't make your best decisions when you're emotionally involved in the decision. You make your better decisions when it's calm and thought out. And that's the type of an atmosphere that you should expect the superintendent to provide for you. One board member, when we were going through the budget reductions 10, 12 years ago, said, "You can't believe that you can smile at people while you're explaining how it is you're going to cut $750,000. Well, you you have to take away the emotional aspect of it, and you have to look at it that, you know, there's not a good way to make cuts that's going to make everyone happy. But you can be pleasant about it. You can be thorough about the information that you give, and you make the decisions that are the best. When somebody says, well, did you know that by making that cut, this will happen? And whatever it is that they say is going to happen isn't going to be good. Your answer should be, yes, I did know that. But unfortunately, we have to make this amount of cuts, and that is the item that will help us get there so that we can provide the rest of the programming we need to provide. And we had to make a value judgment. And you present it in a calm way. And that's what the superintendent should be able to provide. And then the superintendent should be visible in the schools and in the community. So those are kind of the expectations in general. The organizational structure, I gave you a chart with that, and it was included, a lot of this was included in the board materials for today's meeting. But we keep this up annually with who the board members are, when they first came on, when their current terms expire, who the board officers are, the board committee members. And then we do from time to time create additional committees if something comes along or we need something else that has to be addressed. So, and you know, if there's an area that you want to be more involved in, you know, let either the superintendent or the board chair know that you have an interest in that, and there's always an opportunity to be able to become more involved if you wish to be. So, then something that I put together, began doing shortly after I first became a superintendent, was putting together a calendar of annual agenda items. And these are things that just typically come up always about that time of year. So June, the end of the year meeting. These are the things we address. You know, the approval of fees, the annual designations, the health and safety attachment 99, excuse me, and approval of insurance quotes sometimes. Then excuse me, in July, we don't have a regular meeting. August, we typically approve the handbooks, and then also we have the approval of the required policies. There's always a set of board policies that have to be approved annually. It's the same policies, and usually there's no changes unless the legislature made a change in one of the policies in the previous session. But they still have to be acted upon every year. And so those are addressed then. In September, we review the first day of school enrollment figures. Now, first day of school enrollment figure doesn't do anything as far as anything else we do, other than it's something everyone understands. This is the number of kids that walked in the door the first day of school. And you can look at how does it compare to last year or 5 years ago or whatever. It's not the number they use for funding, that comes later on. But it's just a nice marker that everybody seems to understand, and it can be given to you readily right after school starts. Approval of lane changes, and that's with the teaching staff. People have picked up additional graduate courses, and they're moving across on the salary schedule. The certification, initial certification of the levy, because the approval of the annual report on curriculum instruction and student performance, all in September. October, there are no regular items that just consistently come about every October. That's not to say that there won't be plenty of items necessarily on the agenda in October, but it depends upon what's going on at the time. In November, then we start seeing the approval of some of the seniority lists, some of the compliance issues. The audit report will come either in November or December, depending upon how rapidly the audit gets completed. The resolution for canvassing votes if there's been an election. An item that I don't have on there on this one that should be on there is that also every year we do now approve the utilization of a single polling place for special elections. We do that in November now each year. That way, if during the coming calendar year there is a special election, you can run it all out of the tap. Otherwise, excuse me, have some water? Yeah, oh, it's water. Thank you. Otherwise, you it's hard to after a while talk through a mask. Otherwise, you have to keep all of your polling places, all of your precincts open for the full time of the election. Thank you. And then it becomes a very much more costly process. So that's something the state does allow, and we do now try to do that each year. Thank you. You're welcome. January, the organizational meetings. We don't always do our organizational meeting on the first Tuesday in January. Typically, we do it at the regular January meeting. We meet the second Monday. So that's been typically when we've done it. This time we had some people who weren't going to be able to be here necessarily at that meeting, so we moved that forward. And then we were planning anyway to have the orientation at the meeting, so we did that accordingly. The school calendar is generally first approved in February. However, for the past 6 years, we've been on a flexible year program where we've gone with a pre-Labor Day start. And that's going to be coming to an end following next year. And so if you wish to maintain that, that'll have to be reapplied and extended for 3 years. And That's done in conjunction with the rest of the schools in the Marvette. And not all of the schools select the same start dates, but rather they select some staggered ones. A couple of schools still go with the start date after Labor Day. We've been going a week before. Some schools will go 2 weeks before. When we got our first one approved, what we asked for was that we would go a week early the first year, and then we would move to 2 weeks early after that. The first year went really smoothly, and we didn't see a good valid reason to go ahead and push it to 2 weeks. And so we just stayed with 1 week early, and it gave us a little bit more of a run at things before we got into the start of the school year. Also, it enabled us to have 2 short weeks to start the year. We were able to have 2 4-day weeks into that. So we went Monday through Thursday, and then Labor Day weekend was there, and then we came back with Tuesday through Friday next week.
So it's just an open variance. You could.
Yeah. So those are, like I said, it goes through it ties in also with the budget process and some of this things that appear on there depending upon where you're at with your budgeting. And then these have mostly just the regular meetings on there. We also do have the option, and this year we've been putting on a board work sessions as a possibility on each month. Year in and year out, typically we've had, over the past 10, 12 years, we've had board work sessions about every other month over most of that time period. We don't schedule and hold them, or we haven't scheduled and held them every month just for the sake of having an extra meeting. Now, if there isn't something to do, we don't throw in another meeting just to have them. But sometimes it's good to have a chance just to discuss things, to give things a little more thought. Sometimes when you're going through the budget process, then it becomes a big deal to be able to provide more opportunities to gather input, to get the word out to people. Okay, there's an example of board agenda in there. The routine business items, the discussion, action, executive session items. So and then also going along with that, the next page is the information relative to addressing the board. There's a couple of sheets there that just talk about that. It's important to remember that when they talk about public board meetings, it's a board meeting held in the public's view. It's not a meeting of the public. The people in general don't all get to come in and voice whatever thoughts they want and enter into the discussion, but rather there's a time when they can address issues. And it's not when the board is debating an issue at the table. The board debate is a board debate. It's a discussion of board members coming to consensus. And the time for the public input on that can be at a special meeting, it can be at a work session, it can be during the address the board session. But it's important to be able for the board then to also have time when just the board members are talking and coming to an agreement on what it is they want to do. Another thing that can happen, and I had this happen in another district where a board member turned to someone in the public and asked their thought, and the board chair couldn't get the meeting back under control for the better part of 45 minutes. And so that, it needs to be a business meeting. And so that's the purpose of the address of the board. The address of the board is not designed to eliminate public input. It's designed to keep it so that it's an organized manner and you can still get your business accounts. But those are the kind of the guidelines for addressing the board. Then the chain of command, and that was talked about a little bit or referred to a little bit. There are two different ones here. One is kind of the various levels of the chain of command, and the other is just the steps involved in trying to reach solutions. The real key to a chain of command is the best place to solve a problem is as close to the problem as possible. So if the problem is between a parent or a student and a teacher, it's best to start down at the teacher level with a discussion on that. And then if it can't be solved there, move on up to the principal. And as opposed to starting out with going to a board member, having a board member talk to the superintendent, who then goes and asks the principal what's going on with the situation, who then goes and talks to, and then all of a sudden it becomes a kind of a mess as you go through a, relaying of information back and forth. Get the people involved talking to each other. And if they can't talk with each other, then we need to go on to the next step. And if the person causing the difficulty in the talking is the person that's on staff, then we can deal with that also. But those are the things that you need to identify. It is, do suggest if someone talks to you that they start closer to that, or let me know. I'll pass it on to the principal who will make contact then. And then it's reasonable if you've reported something, then that eventually the word gets back to you as how it's handled.
I would say 98% of mine has been due to sports. So it never comes up that either doing great in academics, it has to do with sports, playing time, wins, losses, whatever the case may be. So I always just say, have you, as the player, talk to the coach? If you talk to the coach, then you talk to Gray, and then you talk to her. You do that solves it once you get it. Very rarely does it go up to you, I would say. We can get the parents or the players or community members to talk to the coach and Gray. Usually it's handled like that, but you'll get, that's probably the majority of the ones that I would say I have received for the last 6 years.
Probably 14 years. Somebody yelled at me about that.
So I never got a question about exercise. So it's just the way it is. So yeah, I would say that's kind of the chain of command too. But yeah, I was, if it, there has been some educational stuff or a build related issue where I've always said, well, talk to Mr. Huntley. I was just talking, if you don't like his answer, go see Dr. Heller. For some reason you don't like his answer, then come back or across the board. That usually, we've had really anybody that's really come and talk to you that's the rest of the board because they don't like either a solution or the answer because they found out it's a statute, state law, or whatever the case may be, right?
Have you ever had anybody say that they're going to go to MDE? I wasn't, not even like officially on the board, and about, I suppose about 3 weeks ago, I had somebody call me and tell me they were gonna go to the MDE about Montreal School.
I've never had no.
This is a unique year.
Yeah.
Well, this had nothing to do with COVID, it had nothing to do with this, of the PCO program.
And occasionally I'll get calls from people that will say, well, we're going to talk to the Department of Education, in which they're completely entitled to do that. But what most people don't realize is that whenever you go through the bills and you see bills in there to Kennedy and Graydon, that's our law firm. And we do a lot of business with them. And we also keep in close touch with MDE. So, we make sure that we try to make sure that we're not going outside the bounds of what we're supposed to be doing, that we are following the guidelines. But yeah, we from time to time, we get someone that says they're going to call MDE and they can. I've never had MDE call me back and tell me that we need to change something. I also have people that have threatened to enroll to another district, and I don't try to dissuade them. I tell people that they need to make the decision that's going to be what they believe is best for their family. It's just those are the types of arguments that you're not going to win on getting involved in them typically. But yeah, we get those from time to time. I've had people tell me that they're going to call their lawyer, and I've told them that that's fine. Have their lawyer contact us, and we'll put them in touch with our lawyer, and they can discuss it. But we do vet our information very carefully.
If someone has approached us and asked us a question, we've directed them like Joe has said.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still want to hear about that? Incidents like that?
Generally, I will hear about them, but yeah, it'd be good to just to let me know that, and that way also I can follow up as well and find out, and just to make sure that it is getting.
Okay.
I mean, it's.
Yeah, I'll do that quick bit. Get somebody, tell them go on path, and I'll email or call them, say, here's the concern, here's where I told them to go to, heads up, it might be coming down the road, or so I know, let me know.
That's a good question, because I would say I do the same thing. Just, hey, as a courtesy, just so you know, this is brewing. Maybe it'll become nothing, maybe it will, but at least it gives Dr. Heller a chance to get ahead of it and do his research. Maybe he can stop it before it becomes, or at least get the people the information they need.
Do you have a preferred communication method?
I'll take phone calls. I'll take an email's fine, and give me a quick call. That's fine. A text message. Any time that'd be good. Come in and have a cup of coffee and talk to me about it. That's fine too.
He's here early.
I am here early. And while when people do bring in concerns and talk to me, I'll listen. I won't necessarily respond with, I try to avoid throwing my staff members and such under the bus. But so if the fact that I may not
give an answer right away doesn't mean that I necessarily don't agree or that, but I'll look into it further and deal accordingly, and then I'll follow up with where we're at on it. Okay. Then moving from chain of command to budgeting. So the budgeting process for a school is kind of a rolling 18-month process. And you're always, every school year, you go through parts of 3 different fiscal years. So in the first part of the year, you're approving the audit, which brings to an end the previous year. You've already got in place the budget for the current year, and you start taking action with the certification of the levy and the approval of seniority lists and so forth as you go into as you prepare for the budget that's going to go into effect the next summer. So there's you're always dealing with 3 fiscal years in there as you move through that process. The budget itself, we try to establish some basic budget assumptions. And those are created by the board and the superintendent. They're generally pretty standard. And these are the factors that are going to impact the budget. They're going to serve as the guiding principles. It takes into consideration your revenue trends, your enrollment trends, what's happening as we move through, what's the legislature doing. So all of those things come into it. Then we establish budget goals and targets. Having a balanced budget as opposed to deficit spending. That's always one of the targets that we have. Consideration needs to be given to the fund balance. We try to maintain a 10 to 15% fund balance. Fund balances throughout school districts in Minnesota range everywhere from some districts that are in statutory operating debt, which means that they've been running a negative fund balance, to some districts that have fund balances of 100%. A 10 to 15% fund balance allows adequate cash flow. And that's the real key to a fund balance. If you look at your textbooks on school finance, they recommend 3 months. The problem is that in most districts, particularly when education is based on property tax revenue, if you get a very large fund balance, it becomes harder to justify it to your taxpayers. If the money's just sitting in the bank, they can understand some cash flow. And if we don't have enough money to cash flow, what do? We borrow. And if it's Joe's bank, I don't think Joe's going to just give me the money to use.
Interest.
Yeah. That's all. So that's the importance of cash flow. Now we have another advantage with our particular situation in that we serve as the fiscal host for MERVED. So all of the money for MERVED runs through us, which gives us more money running through, so we can cash flow pretty readily. All we have to do is make sure that when the time comes for the audit, all of the money's back where it's supposed to be. But that helps with our cash flow. back when we were going through the budget cuts and when the state was pulling money out for excessive fund balances. And they were actually delaying payments to these schools. We didn't ever have to borrow money because we were hosting Merved and we had more money available to cash flow with. So we were one of the few school districts in the area that during that time didn't have to borrow money. But you have to be careful when the state's taking money out early and withholding it from schools, that goes onto your books as a receivable. So if you look at the budget at that time, it showed that we had a huge fund balance, but most of that money wasn't in the bank. At one time, it was about $2.75 million, about 10 years ago, that wasn't in the bank yet because it hadn't come in yet. But it showed that we had that fund balance. So you have to make sure you didn't spend that money because it was gonna.
You'll hear more about fund balancing, especially Tyler, on the negotiation side. We really do a lot of negotiations due to how this affect the fund balance. Many times when we go under 10%, and then we might have a verbal agreement with the teachers union, we'll say we'll need to get board approval, and we'll come to the full board and say, in order to get this contract done, this is going to bring our fund balance from 10.3 down to 9.8. Is the board okay with it? So as more and more we start getting the contracts and stuff like that, there are times that we go down, we try not to, but you'll understand more of the fund balance that way too.
Yeah, like, I mean, right now is a perfect example of why we needed a fund balance because of all the things that have happened, we've let off 10%.
Right.
Because of COVID.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah. Well, yeah, because of COVID, and then, I mean, I was just doing some quick math with, kids enrolling in an online program,
Right.
more PSEO, or just homeschooling. That adds up in hurry.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah, our enrollment dropped about 50 kids.
52 is my math, yeah.
Yeah.
341,000.
When we had projected growth, especially with that largest, that's what I was thinking
The
when you
kindergarten
said
class was supposed to grow us, yeah.
that largest kindergarten class, and I know there are several families that chose to not send their kids even though they could have, just because of the nature of the situation. Either they decided to homeschool or just wait a year, and so that could have been even bigger.
Yeah.
And then the older kids that made other decisions.
I mean, that hole we gotta cut is just because of probably a swing in enrollment.
Right.
So
That probably won't come back. You don't know that.
it's always hard to say. So when we look at budgeting and when we look at particularly having to reduce the budget, which we haven't had to do that much since about my second or third year here. But what we try to do is administratively, we'll recommend budget cuts of about 110 to 115% of what's needed. And then that's the responsibility of the administration to come up with that. And then that's utilizing also input from faculty and staff. That's establishing what we need. And then from those recommendations, then the board can decide what to keep, what to reinstate into there.
We'll be looking at doing that in a couple months. Yes, this is an FYI. We'll have that to throw on your plate. Decide what gets cut and what gets reinstated.
So then I gave you what our current budget assumptions look like. first 2 pages of that are just are kind of the more general ones that really don't change much. You know, it's looking at things like health and safety and litigation and so forth. And then the specific assumptions begin on about the 3rd page of that with the information relative to the finances, relative to student enrollment, the information on the fund balance.
No, I'm going there, but I gotta go.
So, and on the fund balance, so in the summer of 19, we had a budgeted fund balance of 7.1. Now, as we looked at that, we always anticipate that we're going to be able to adjust as we go through and we monitor our budget. Unfortunately, as we moved forward, then we ended up moving into the pandemic and we couldn't adjust it. We didn't have that option. And so it fell to just under 6%. And so what we're going to be doing, we're working currently on a plan to reduce next year's budget by about 4%, 4 to 6%. But that would bring us back up to about a 10% fund balance. And so right now, the administrators are working on looking in each of their buildings and their programs as to what things might they be able to make modifications in, bring that down. And if every building can bring down 4%, that'll put us back up into that range. That's a bigger reduction than we've had to make since we went through the real large reductions back 10, 12 years ago. At that time, we reduced about 10% of the general fund and 10% of our staff during my first 2 years here. Then we've built up from that point on.
That was the last time I attempted to.
Yeah. But up here, there's a bunch of people. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
There was a lot of people like that.
there were. So. The budget, the development of the budget itself follows a calendar, and I provided a copy of the budget calendar that was, the calendar itself was adopted in December, but it really gets its beginning back in November with the seniority list. And it just lays out the process for the budgeting. It always includes all of the items that are on there, regardless of whether or not we're going to have to use all of the steps that are on there. So the unrequested leave and the termination of positions and so forth, those are always listed on the budget calendar, just to keep it in front of people so that you know that in years where it has to be done, this is when it's done. This is the timeline. If you miss the timeline, then you may not be able to take some of the actions that are necessary. So, because you have to give time for all the proper notifications. You have to give time if hearings are requested and so forth. Then for information, I provided the copy of the enrollment data. The opening day and how that, the highlighted one across the bottom, the second to the lowest one there, that's our K-12. And then the total includes the ECSE, the early childhood special ed. That doesn't include like Little Thunderhawks and such. That's just the early childhood special ed program. The end of November figures are what we generally use for budgeting purposes. Those are the ones that tend to be a little more stable. And the budget that was approved for 2021 and what the actual budget for 1920 was. There are a couple of them that show that. And then also the comparison and within the board reports, that final document, the program and object budget, it breaks it down into the 9 program areas or 10 program areas: administration, district support, instructional services, and so forth. And then also by your objects, salaries, benefits, purchase services, supplies, capital, and so forth. And our general fund budget for 2021 school year is just under $20 million. Our budget across all funds, which would be the last page of all of this, the budget across all funds is just under $25 million. So we are one of the biggest businesses in town. We're one of the largest employers, and we have a very big operation.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Well,
Good review.
that's a little bit about our operations and their district. Questions? They gave you a lot of information. And not a test on it. You don't have to remember all of it right away, but it does give you a little idea as to the magnitude of some of it, and then also hopefully some information for you to be able just to look back over and as things come to mind. Then if questions come up, certainly ask.
Anything for us? At this point?
Right now,
Has
it's
your-
still process.
Yeah. Most board meetings don't take 3 hours either, but just it's the review.
Yeah, it's good.
A lot of information.
I think stuff that we'll have to think about as a board, we got a bigger year than we probably had in 10 years. We haven't had budget cuts of any significance in 10 years. We haven't hired a superintendent about that long. We haven't had other administrator turnover in longer than that, really. We haven't tried to recover from a pandemic, and we have still figured out what to do with our building situations. Plenty of stuff to think about.
But I think as you look at some of it, I think that some of what you need to do moving forward isn't so much whether or not you need to make decisions on all of these things. But for example, with facilities, we know we've got aging facilities. I think it's important to start deciding when do you want to start to address what under some of those. And so it's not necessarily as important to say we're going to go out right now and have a bond referendum to build everything we need, as it is to say, you know, we need to address this, and then we need to address this, and then whatever it may be on down the road. You know, when we were running the one in April, which started right as the pandemic started, which unfortunately wasn't a real good time, and I couldn't convince anybody that I had a choice was whether or not we proceeded forward. But you know, they won't let you, once ballots are cast, stop an election. So we had to move forward. But at that time, we were looking at addressing the elementary, and we knew that as soon as that was finished, we were going to have to come right back and start to address the high school, because that facility's over. So, but I think that's the key, is that you need to start planning as to when things are going to be addressed and how you're going to look at things and moving things forward. So you don't need to decide this year or next year what each of those facilities are going to look like down the road, but just that
it's deciding, are we going to do something or are we going to defer? That's kind of the first question, right?
Yeah.
So kind of on that more, not to keep us here a whole lot longer, but the Fine Arts Center, is it defunct? I mean, is there any hope for it at this point? Now that, I mean, I know we had some events planned there that had to get canceled, the school pictures, nope, it's not, can't use it.
Yeah.
Is that our way of saying that's it?
Well, that was kind of the decision that was made coming out of the retreat.
Yeah, yeah, I know that we definitely talked about
was
that.
not utilizing it, and because of the health concerns. And so, yeah, we have been telling people, no, you can't rent it, and you.
I know someone approached me from the Community Concert Association, because, you know, it directly affects that whole group, and they're saying, what we got to come up with a plan, or our membership, which was already barely making ends meet, is probably going to fall apart. So, like, yeah, I get it. I feel for you. So they're looking at, you know, do they try to use Dawson's facility for that time being, or do they try to use one of the churches? I don't know.
They want to buy it for a buck?
No, they don't want, I don't think they want this.
Nobody wants it.
I don't want
They just want something to use.
Now, and one of the things that, you know, we have said is that, for example, if they're going to put on plays right now, they'll have to bring in a portable stage into the gym.
And changing rooms, and dressing rooms, and on-off stages, you know, it's going to be different. But what do you do?
I would imagine let's not use it for almost a year now.
That's the
It's just-
point. It's got to be terrible.
Yeah.
It hasn't
Or
been
something
opened
open
up.
sides, besides janitorial going in once they're glued to make sure
Yeah.
the water's not flooding up anymore.
Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs right there, but I don't know.
Good to adjourn this session.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
We're adjourned.